Call the Finance Committee for April 7th to order. All members are present, Alderwoman Finlayson and Alderman Payon. First item on the agenda is approval of the agenda.
I move we approve the agenda.
I'll second that.
Hi.
Don't forget, you were going to amend the agenda to include the director from Public Works presentation.
Yes, I'm sorry. So we do, and that's why Mr. Johnson is here, is to give us a presentation on the CIP. So we do need to amend the agenda to do that, or he gets off easy.
Mr. Chair, I will move that we amend the agenda to include a presentation on the CIP from Director Johnson.
Second.
All in favor signify by saying, oops.
No, this is, I have a question.
Yes.
Is this the CIP that's in the upcoming budget? Or just the CIP in general?
Well, for me, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Yeah, the CIP in general.
Okay, all right,
Yeah.
all right. I hadn't heard about this, so I just wanted to.
Yeah. Yes, I have two CIP issues that the mayor and I have discussed, and I wanted to bring them to the committee. So all those in favor of approving the amended agenda signify by saying aye.
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 The ayes have it. All right. Next item before the committee is approval of the minutes from the last meeting. Do I have a motion?
So
Mr. Chair,
moved.
I'll move approval of the minutes from the March 17th meeting.
I assume one or the other of you will second your motion. So all those in
Second.
favor of approval of the minutes signify by saying aye.
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 All right, the minutes are approved. We have two essays on the agenda. Both of them are monies being transferred to planning and zoning to pay for traffic studies. Katie, are you here to speak to those? Or, I mean, they look like they're pretty straightforward, except the size differential is perplexing to me, but
Is that
I was
because it's
hoping,
missing a number?
pardon me?
I was asking, is that because it's a revenue number that's missing from the document? We have the expenditure, but we don't have a revenue.
Well, I mean, this is.
On the second one, I believe, the first one has the revenue and the expenditure side shown, but the document that's attached to, okay.
The one I'm looking at does not have the revenue. It only has the expenditure.
Okay, I'm trying to open this back up.
That was the first one, I believe.
First one, the attachment that's on the first one.
Okay, I went to the second document, so.
Look at the document that's SA 2921.
Okay, I do see that. It was the second one on the partnership that
Okay.
had the revenue and had the expenditure, no revenue.
Okay, hold on. Let me go to that.
Alderwoman Finlayson, you're talking about the Bemby Beach?
Yes. Isn't that
And
the
you're
first one?
That's the first one.
Okay, sorry.
But the attachment for the second one also has our SA form with both the revenue and the expenditure shown.
Yeah, I saw that.
Well, then what's the second document that's attached to the first essay? Because it is the one that's not complete. Now, if it's not necessary because it's on the first document, that's fine.
Yeah, that's what the department submitted to me as backup. So I just forwarded that entire PDF. So the first one is really what you guys should be seeing and approving. This is just coming right from the department. It's more internal documentation.
Okay.
So normally we would have something that would show that we're accepting the receipts of these monies, and then we're showing the monies flowing back out to pay for the study. So I think Alderwoman Finlayson is correct. You would expect to see something in both the from and to column.
So you do, and this second form that she attached is got an old request form in the front, which is not what we use as our formal form. And what you're seeing there is the proof of the receipt of the money that follows. It's a multi-page document, and the proof of the receipt is there. And on the other form, the one that says SA 2921, that is our formal SA form that gets signed and approved by everybody.
What you guys are used to looking at is the documents that have the control number. It has the SA in that control number. So it should be the first page that you guys see.
Right, but
I understand the confusion.
well, because it's not showing any revenue. Looking at SA 29, it's showing an expenditure of $2,800, but it's not showing revenue coming in of $2,800.
So it's right under the account name where it says revenue general fund contributions.
I'm looking at the very first form, and it says
does it have a
revenue,
control
and
number?
it has a number there in the account name, but it doesn't have a dollar amount there. So in T accounting,
You want to look at the form that has a control number.
well, I don't. This is the only form I have attached.
Julian, can you share the screen? That might help here.
There's two attachments. One is the SA and one is labeled Bembe Beach Partnership. The partnership one is the one that does not have a control number or a revenue source. It does, however, have the documentation. We don't need both that and the SA. I mean, we can have the SA with the supported documentation from Hyatt and Weber, but that second form that's incomplete.
It is not, you're right. It's not necessary. Sally filled it out. It's an old form. We don't use them anymore, but she attached it to her support. So we just took the whole support and put it in there. And you're right, it's confusing because it looks like it's trying to be one of those SA forms.
Well, may I, if Sally, Mr. Chair, may I ask a question? I don't see Sally with us though. It said on the second form, it's a supplemental traffic impacts work. Does that mean that there was a traffic impact study and then they needed additional study and therefore the supplemental?
So I'm not going to be able to answer that question. That's a Sally question. And I don't know if Takia can try to get a hold of her to have her come on the meeting.
Well, actually, I see what I was doing wrong. I was looking at all the supplemental information for SA 2921 and not at the actual form. The actual form looks correct to me. It's showing revenues of 28 and services of 28. So, and it explains why. So let me
We just need to edit those forms a little bit better and only attach what's necessary.
Yeah.
I agree with Ross. I didn't have any trouble at all following it, but
yeah. So
it is different.
the fact of the matter is these monies have been received and expended. It's a pass-through, and it seems to me that it would be appropriate for us to approve.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion that we give a favorable recommendation for SA 2921.
A second.
Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Have it. Same thing now for SA 30-21. this again is a receipt of monies from the contract, from the applicant that were passed through to get a contractual services traffic study done.
Mr. Chair, I move approval.
I will second that, but I'd like discussion, similar to the initial discussion on the previous one.
Certainly. Please go ahead.
And I'm looking at the second document that's attached without a control number. And on this one, it appears we have the revenue, but not an expenditure.
So in our iPad, on mine at least, under this, I have actually where it says on the right-hand side, legislation text, there are two things there. One is SA 30-21, and one of which is the detail that goes underneath to justify this. When I look at the SA 30-21, I see the normal form that shows general fund contributions and contract services. And that seems to be consistent with what we normally see. The second attachment, the GSX Solutions, is the one that shows the underlying detail about receiving a check, and you see that on the second page for this amount of money. So like you, Alderwoman Finlayson, I was focusing on the second attachment initially and not the first attachment. It's the first attachment that is the SA, and it shows the normal T accounting of revenue and an expenditure.
So I would like to suggest that the form that's confusing on both of these essays not be included in future essay documentation. First of all, it's not needed and it's not complete, and we're getting confused because there's no control number, et cetera.
Yep.
Just give us the documentation that supports it, and
Okay, we will.
we're good. Yeah.
Okay. All right. I thought that was going to be the easy part. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor of recommending approval of SA 30-21, please signify by saying aye.
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 The ayes have it. All right. Moving on to general discussion. We need discussion of
Mr.
the.
Chair, Alderman Gay has his hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't.
Yeah, no
Yes.
problem. I wanted to ask in the beginning, but I was cooking breakfast and y'all was moving so fast.
Wait, what are we having? We'll be right over.
Bacon.
Oh, everybody loves bacon. I hope you.
I know. I move we adjourn and go to Dwan.
For this in particular, though, I'm sorry. What exactly is the partnership? Is this a small project? I'm looking at receipts and stuff, but I really just wasn't sure what you guys just have recommended to the council.
So the way the traffic studies are done now per code is we require the applicant to submit money to the Planning and Zoning Department. They randomly choose one of 5 different contractors, and the contractor does the study and sends the bill. The contractor sends us a check, and then that's entered into our receipts and then entered in as an expenditure for that contract service. So it's really a pass-through.
So yeah, so they're just paying. Okay, awesome. Thank you.
But I do wonder why you can do one for $2,800 on Bimby Beach, which I think was a pretty complicated project, and the other one is $15,000. That seems like quite a disparate amount, but I think that's getting into the weeds. It's what it is, and Dr. Nash has given us the documentation.
I think it's going to depend on the project and what they're studying. And Bemby Beach traffic study, that's a very limited road access road, and there's probably not as much involved in studying that traffic flow as it would on something else.
Mr. Chair, though, I had asked why it was labeled as supplemental, and that's what I was getting to, because traditionally, traffic studies are 15 to, I want to say, 26,000. So that very small amount may be a supplement to a larger study. And even though Bemby Beach and Edgewater Road is a small road in the city of Annapolis, there are an awful lot of residences and businesses that will be impacted. So, and traffic is pretty heavy. I used to live down there and, you know, went to Easter egg hunts
What?
down on Bemby
You didn't
Beach.
live in Ward 4?
Not until much later. Actually, I lived in your ward for most of my early years. You know that.
I would suggest that I share your curiosity, both Alderwoman Finlayson and Alderman Gay, but the numbers are the numbers. I think that we can have a sidebar discussion with Dr. Nash when we see her next. And since almost every meeting I go to, Sally is in attendance, I think we will see her frequently. But we have dispatched with these, and I think that we'll know for the record, it's a matter of curiosity about the disparate size. And I agree with you, Alderwoman Finlayson. Most traffic studies I've seen have been in the $15,000 to $20,000 or $25,000 range. So it is curious, but it is what it is. We have next the budget meeting schedule, but I don't think we need to keep Mr. Johnson here. I would like to move with the committee's permission into a discussion of the CIP. And I'm the one that has generated this item on the agenda. So with your permission, can I tell you what's on my mind?
Mr. Chair, we seem to be including Director Johnson at every meeting also. So
I know.
Yes, I would support. We just saw him last evening at a meeting or two. So yes, absolutely. I would support moving him up on the agenda.
So I consider seeing Mr. Johnson a pleasant aspect of our meeting. So the two things that are of some immediacy, and they're similar in their direction, but they're very different. The first one is I spoke with the mayor, and as you have some seen in the paper, quite topical is the notion of public access at Wells Cove. And in meetings that I've had with the mayor and senior staff, we've concluded that we would like to proceed to build a dock at the public right-of-way there at Wells Cove. And I think that the question I had for you, Mr. Johnson, is have we gotten any kind of cost estimate for what would be entailed in doing a dock, and are we ready to make an amendment to the CIP to add this as an amendment and get the money ready to start building that dock?
Alderman, we have not, we do not have a cost estimate at this point. There are some technical considerations that we sort of still have to work out. The big issue there is that at Wells Cove, there is a substantial city outfall, stormwater outfall that is in the same vertical plane as any dock that would be placed there. And I think that one of the residents who has a lot of experience in, I'm forgetting his name right now, I think Jim, I don't want to say his name incorrectly. I have to have a meeting with him to sort of get a better idea. He had some ideas as to how we might be able to approach
Jim
this.
Urban. Jim Urban,
thank you, Jim Urban. Right, Jim Urban. Yes.
Yeah.
So following my meeting, I haven't had that meeting with him yet, but following that meeting, I would then be in a position to sort of determine what the cost is, because I do have some concerns with building in that plane. That is a substantial piece of infrastructure that can damage the adjoining properties if it's damaged in some way. So we have to be a bit careful with that. So that's a long answer, but we don't have the budget.
Right. Well, but you can't build it if we don't make a room for it in the budget. And so that's why it's germane to the Finance Committee. And obviously it's also germane to the Finance Committee, because if the Finance Committee agrees with making this public access available through a dock structure, we have to go to the council writ large to get approval for that amendment to the CIP. I think the one thing that I've talked about with the mayor and you and Dr. Nash and others is you may need to have some sort of access through the dock to the catchment basin in case it gets clogged up or it needs routine cleaning or something like that. Other than that, I'm hard to press to understand. A dock is where you drive pilings and put cross members in and lay planks over top of it. The reason for pursuing this solution is the city has clearly had a right-of-way there for the stormwater access. It's been clearly documented, and it is clearly documented in city council legislation, both R2286, I believe, and R2787, when granting permission for the Blue Heron condominium to be built, that there were provisions made for public access to the waterway. And it was specific even to describing the installation of a 4-foot wide oyster shell path coming from Boucher Avenue out to the water. And the right-of-way is actually 15 feet. In most places, there are some places where there's an indent because there's building homes there. But I think that this is clearly the intent of a previous council, and clearly in things I've heard voiced from this council and from the mayor, that we want to encourage, maintain, develop, preserve existing right-of-ways to the water for the public, and the building of a dock there would make that possible. And in fact, in discussions, David is in another meeting and won't be able to join us till 11 o'clock, he said, but David has already pursued this with DNR to make sure, how far out we would have to go to be in the navigable waters so that the water taxi could stop there. This water access is now documented in the city dock advisory plan, and is also documented in the Maritime Task Force as one of the water access points, and is part of Director Wendy O'Sullivan's concept of Annapolis as a gateway to the Chesapeake. And she shows maps showing both this and Hawkins Cove as water access. So it seems to me that it's time for us to think about putting our money where our mouth is. And that means, do you have any ballpark notion of what installing a dock would be? Is it $80,000? Is it $15,000?
I actually am hesitant to provide a number, even though I understand that you need a number. I don't really have it because of were that outfall not there, I think we would be able to better say, but we still need to look at it to really give you a very good number, a better number. I don't have a good number right now.
You shouldn't be giving us numbers if you're not ready to. Alderman Gay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, I've been reading the emails that some of your constituents have been sending back and forth, and I've been getting involved in that with some of mine. Maybe not as much as vocal in the emails, but in person as it relates to Hawkins Cove and Wells Cove and all of that. And so my question is, if we are prepared to move forward with this in the CIP so that we can actually allocate funding for these projects, would it make sense to move forward with that dock seeing how limited the space is and how hesitant the neighbors are, and take those dollars and just put it into Hawkins Cove so that we can have, restore the property, get the grounds right, and then we can install that dock that people seem to want to have out to the water, or look at dredging, which would be expensive. I mean, but I think put the money where there's, more access at instead of the limited access. What are your thoughts on that? And again, I'm not a member of this committee. I appreciate you guys for giving me opportunities to speak.
So I don't see it as an either or. I do think that the issue with Wells Cove is more firmly developed. The right of way is there, some explorations, and dredging is a big issue with DNR, and I think dredging is more germane to Hawkins Cove, because you have to go much further out to get to any kind of navigable waters there. I frankly like putting a dock there too and having it extend out, and I'd like to do things like put benches there. I think that's places where people can come and fish and crab. But I think we're further along with Wells Cove than we are Hawkins Cove. I think there's still some debate at Hawkins Cove about making that just a pathway through as opposed to more fully developing it. One of the concepts I had, and you and I have talked about, is making that as user-friendly as possible to the people who live nearby in public housing. I've talked about working with the people that want to go in water park over there, the people that want to do the work, to do some kind of a structure that would be a testament to Blacks on the Bay, vis-a-vis Vince Liggett's book about Blacks on the Bay and the huge, largely unknown role that they had in providing the oysters and the crabs and the fish and so forth, as a monument that would further speak to that part of our history in the city. But those are, as you know, the deputy city manager is working on this, and those plans are still much more in the developmental phase. I do think we will need to spend money there, and I personally support spending money. I think anything we can do to provide water access, but especially water access at Hawkins Cove, is something we ought to do. I just don't know that we're ready to pull the trigger on that, but I will support it. If you have some ideas, I would certainly support that.
Yeah, no, I just think that with the pending litigation and all of this stuff that's going on, would it just make sense to say, all right, let's just fully focus all of our resources here? But I am definitely in support of the Wells Cove project as well. You know that we talked about that.
Right.
So I just was bringing up the thought.
So what I was doing in truth was to catch up the finance committee, and I see Dr. Nash has joined us, and she's been on some of those meetings with the mayor and city manager and I, and city attorney Lyles and so forth. But we are definitely, the mayor and I are on record as supporting public access here. We do have a right of way. I think the writ is taking its own way. I'm not particularly happy about the way that's going, but the right of way is there. That's indisputable. And the legislation passed by the council to create public access is express. There is an issue that Dr. Nash is working on. We wanted to get a survey that specifically shows that right of way. And there's discussion about incorporating that on the deed for Blue Heron. I'm convinced that that's nice to do, but not a requirement to do. The right of way is there, and the legislated intent to have public access is there of long standing, and building the dock is the next obvious step to provide water access. And we can build it over the outfall, or we can build it next to the outfall. The appeal Mr. Johnson, I don't know how much you've really gotten involved in the nitty-gritty details of this. The appeal of building it over the outfall is it will be a pier coming out next to slip 3 that does belong to Blue Heron Cove. And there's going to be some issues of leaving room alongside of the dock and the finger pier to allow people to come alongside of those and get on and off boats and launch paddle boards and dinghies and kayaks and so forth. Those will certainly be matters that will have to get adjudicated at some point before the port wardens. They are topic of the recently passed amendments to Title 15 to protect public access. And all of those things need to be sorted out. But I would like to be prepared in the budgetary process to be able to move forward. And Alderman Gay, if you want to talk about the same initiative for the next round of the CIP for Hawkins Cove, you have an ally in me on that one as well. I just don't know that we've made determinations about how much dredging, if anything, and how far out the pier would go, and those kinds of things, where it's pretty clear here at Wells Cove what would need to be done.
Well,
Mr. Johnson.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. Yeah, my apologies.
Oh, thank you. All the persons. One of the issues that, in air quotes, that we have with our current CIP, and we're working to try to make an adjustment, is that projects are entering the CIP that, in my opinion, I've discussed this also with David, are not ready for prime time. They're not ready in the CIP. And the result of that is the projects are dwelling within the CIP for far too long, with frustrations on the parts of stakeholders, members of the council, and others. And the core problem that is causing this is what I'm sort of hesitant. You hear my hesitancy is this, that for many of the projects that are entered into the CIP do not have a proper degree of scoping. They are improperly scoped. They are ideas. In other words, we want to do Hawkins Cove, for instance. That's a great idea. I agree with you. It's a terrific idea. We want to do Wells Cove. That's a terrific idea. But the details for the engineers to work on this and to sort of deliver the project in a timely fashion, we have to have a clear scope of work so we understand what has to be done, what sorts of costs we will be facing, what sort of risks the project have, who our primary active stakeholders are, et cetera, things of that nature. And when projects are entered without that, you end up with like projects, and I'll give a contemporaneous project, the Truxton tennis courts, which I was told took about 4 years to complete, something like that. Yeah. And it would appear as if there's something dilatory on the part of Public Works. The furthest thing from the truth, not the case. What is happening? What happened with that project? If I could just digress a bit to just give a quick synopsis of that, is that it was inadequately scoped. It's what I would call an idea. It entered the CIP, and then it's turned over to our project manager. Okay, deliver this project. As they began to work, they began to find that they have water intrusion, inadequate subbase, all sorts of issues that were not accounted for in the budget. They're technical issues, and we're discovering it at the wrong phase when we have a contractor on board, which is the worst time to do it because he's going to charge you, he's going to make a lot of money off the city on that. And the project goes into abeyance, and it drags on, and eventually we manage to wrestle it back into the corral and almost finish it. We would like to move away from that approach with CIPs and to sort of do a preliminary step of scoping. So we would get the process that we would like to follow goes quickly like this. We would have a project initiation phase. That's the idea. I want to do whatever it is. The council wants us to do that. It gives us an opportunity then to determine what needs to be done to make that happen. Because sometimes simple sounding projects are actually quite complex to deliver, to make them happen. And then it gives us an opportunity to sort of come up with a better budget. And then for all the stakeholders, the council in this case, to take a look at that budget and see if that is something that you still feel you want to spend city dollars on. If you wish to do that, your wish is our command, so to speak. We will then move forward to the next phase, but we will come back to you with a correct figure, a more realistic figure, which then allows the project to enter the CIP. What that does is that it sets realistic expectations for the council. Our project managers understand clearly what needs to be done, and the number we give you is not just a wild guess. Because unless you are truly fortunate, any guess that is given at the preliminary phase, take like Hawkins Cove. Hawkins Cove has lots of issues. If you try to make it navigable, that could be very, very expensive. That somebody at a preliminary phase is sort of guessing at is almost certain to be wrong. So, for you, we would then have to come back and say, well, whatever good reason we gave, we missed the budget. And that's probably not satisfactory to, if I could speak for you, it would not satisfactory to you. In other words, you would wonder why we are always missing our numbers. And the problem really lies with the process. So we would prefer with due respect or respectfully request that we don't try to put anything into the CIP for 22, but give us 22 to develop the scopes for these projects for delivery starting 23. And that would then give us a right-sized CIP, a coherent CIP, one that is transparent and that allows our PMs who work very hard to deliver the projects in a timely fashion. I don't think that either of those two projects that you mentioned are ready for CIP insertion. That's my thought on it. And having taken a look at the CIP and try to understand why we're having this sort of recurring problem with the dwell time of projects.
So, but here's the rub, and I'll recognize you in a second, Sheila, but I agree with you. Things tend to get on the CIP and stay there forever, and we actually issue bonds and we don't spend them and all of those sorts of things. But here's the rub. It sounds to me like you're talking about a new intermediate process, which might be a process of resolution where the council does resolutions stating their intent to do such and such a project, but it is the capital improvement plan. It is not the capital improvement budget itself. That comes elsewhere in the capital budget. So we do plan on doing things at Wells Cove, and we do plan on doing things at Hawkins Cove. And I will tell you, there is some urgency that we're feeling with our constituents about planning to do things at Wells Cove sooner rather than later. But in terms of the scoping out of the project, that clearly is the purview of the engineers and the people in public works. So I don't know how we get from designating, earmarking that these are projects that we want to do, and then get them somehow into the CIP, which I agree with you is sort of this hybrid wish list, but also funding list where we put down funding amounts and we issue grants. And so I respect that this is something, and actually it's one of the things I appreciate about you is this fresh perspective on these things. But there are also projects that are fairly urgent to do. I'm not particularly fond of the notion of telling people that in the fiscal 23, we will add this to the CIP, and then it may or may not be built in fiscal 24 or 25. That's not water excess. And so I'm trying to figure out how we take your, what I feel to be astute comments about the process, and a process that hasn't necessarily been working well for a long time, but also get things done. And I see City Manager Gerald has joined us, and he may want to jump in on this too. But I think that part of this actually speaks to another part of the CIP that I don't think works particularly well, which is how we give priorities to projects. And that's long been noodled around and so forth. I would bet that for many of us, that this water access project has a pretty high priority and a pretty immediacy. But that's the very reason why I wanted to bring it up at the Finance Committee. And I've talked long enough, and I want to recognize Alderwoman Finlayson, or Sheila, if you want to defer to David, whichever.
Well, if David knows my question, then absolutely, but I gather not. I was going to ask a question along the lines of where Mr. Johnson was going. And you and I, Alderman, have been around long enough, all of us, to see how long things stay in the CIP. You know, I mean, it could be 5 or 6 years from start to finish. And so I like the idea that Mr. Johnson is proposing, that we only put things in the CIP when they're ready for the CIP. So maybe, and you know, we create false expectations in the community, because once it gets on the CIP, folks assume that it's going to be moving and they're going to see some action immediately and probably see the end of the project pretty quickly. And we know that that's not how it works. So maybe there should be a preliminary stage where it's investigative, if I'm saying that correctly, where the planning department, not the planning, Public Works has an opportunity to investigate all the components of the project. And once they have made those determinations, and as it relates to the cost, then it goes on the CIP. And then we have a more realistic approach to when the project is going to begin and end. And I think that might help the residents that you're now going to have to go back to and say, we're really not ready to get started on this yet because we don't have all the details. But I think that may help if they know that it's in a stage. Might not be the stage that they want it in at the moment, but it's in a stage and it will get there once all the preliminary work is done. So that probably wasn't a question. That was probably just
no, comment. It was a statement, but it's one that I subscribe to. The CIP and the capital budget have long been confused, and I think that's what Mr. Johnson is saying too. Give us some sort of resolution or notion and some sense of priority, and we'll do the scoping. And then it can be scheduled in the CIP, and it can be scheduled as an interleaves with all the other projects, capital projects that are on the CIP. And I accept all of that, but I'm saying this has priority for me. But let's hear from Director Gerald, and then Alderman Gay had his hand up.
Thank you. So just a couple of thoughts. One is that capital projects take a long time. So that's everywhere you go. That's in the Navy, that's, you know, the federal government, that's at the state level, that's at every city that I'm familiar with. So that's the nature of the beast. There are emergency projects that can be done more quickly, and we have means to do that. So please don't think of, you know, things like Wells Cove that need to be done quickly as being indicative of the whole CIP, because they can't all be treated as emergencies, or none of them are emergencies, right? So we need to pick and choose the ones that are appropriate to do those ways. But you'll recall that we had this very formalized system for CIPs in the past, where we had a working committee that brought forward all the projects. They bring those forward in the January, February timeframe. Public Works would quickly scope those projects, and then we get them into the CIP. And then it would take, they weren't properly scoped typically. There wasn't enough investigation done. And so that would have to happen then after the CIP. What Director Johnson is proposing is, let's do all that project initiation first before we ever enter it. Let's have the departments come forward. present their projects. Then we spend some time, probably a year, to do the project initiation, where then when it comes back the next time, it gets put into the CIP. That's not going to work for all the projects. We know that. That's going to take too long. But for things like the tennis courts that Mike mentioned, where we ended up with a nightmare, not knowing all of the problems that first of all, that there wasn't a base below the tennis courts when we demolished the court surface. And then we found out that there was water intrusion into those. So it caused a lot of problems. And as Mike said, you don't want to find that during construction. You want to find that prior to ever putting shovels in the ground. So I think that we have a better way to do this. When I was in San Diego, our engineering department there was about 250 people. And we had a lot of projects, but we had one section that was called PITS, and that's Project Initiation and Technical Services. And that's all they did. They took new projects that were coming in and they properly scoped them and researched them before they ever got entered into the CIP. And that's really what Mike is talking about here, is using his existing engineers to do some of that background investigation before it ever gets put into the CIP. And I think it's the right thing to do. Overall, it's probably not going to delay most projects because this was work that has to be done anyway. But it's better to do it before it goes into the CIP instead of after.
So before I go to Alderman Gay, how do we, well, you said two things that piqued my curiosity. One, Wells Cove may not be a CIP. It may be an emergency project. And I say hallelujah to that, sign me up. But the second one is, if we're going to have this intermediate stage, which sounds good to me, and it's not just the departments with wish lists, it's the electeds that have wish lists as well. How do we create that intermediate system? I think that's what Alderwoman Finlayson, you were referring to also. And I think that makes a great deal of sense. And that's why the CIP is kind of both a plan, which is here's our notion and our syncing up of all of these different projects, but it also has capital budget amounts associated with it, even though it's not the capital plan itself. So I think we've kind of gotten it mixed up, two different things, the capital budget and the capital wish list, if you want to call it that. Maybe we should change it to the CIWL, capital wish list. But I guess I have questions about how we change the longstanding problem with the CIP and how it's worked or not worked. And then the other more immediate to me is, how do we get something going at Wells Cove? But Alderman Gay had his hand up. I did want to say, I see Dr. Nash on, and I hope you're here, Dr. Nash, because you want to listen to this discussion. If you're here because we were talking about the essays and you have other more pressing business, we don't want to hold you here. But I just want to say that for your convenience.
Okay, I'm sorry. What did you say?
So I was saying we were talking about the two essays that had to do with the traffic studies, and we were a little confused, and we got that all straightened out, and those are approved. If you're here for that, we don't want to hold you. If you're here to hear this other scintillating discussion, of course, by all means, stand by. But I didn't want to keep you here.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I thought that Artikia asked me that, or told me that you had a few questions for me, but that you figured it out. So yes. I've been triple booked this morning, so I will go back to my other meeting that I was in.
Good, thank you. We didn't want to keep.
So right. Thank you.
Sure. Alderman Gay, you've been patient. What would you like to say?
Thank you very much. I'm trying to find in the budget from last year, the flow chart of Public Works. I can't find it. So my first question, how many engineers are actually in the Department of Public Works? I see here it says City Manager, Public Works, Administration Services, Utilities, Engineering and Construction, Fleet Maintenance, Water Treatment Plant, Solid Waste. So in that Engineering and Construction arm, how many employees are in that?
There's 250. You heard David say it.
in the engineering and construction part.
I believe
there's 6 civil engineer twos.
Right, and then we have some stormwater. I think it's 9. If it's somewhere around there. I believe that's the number that we have. Nine folks, two stormwater, and then civil engineers as well.
Okay, I'm just asking to get an idea of who's doing what work and what tasks. Because as I was sitting here listening, the Republican in me was coming out a little bit, just thinking of sometimes government gets in the way of itself. And I'm saying that because if, for example, if we propose an idea, the council does, I'll use the traffic that, study from the transportation department, the 5-year development plan. If we propose something like that in 2019 and the council generally agrees that this is the direction we want to go in, everybody's on board, we have extended conversations from the proposal, in my mind, it would then go back to the city manager, and he would say to the head of the department, this is what the city council would like to see. And so you would assign someone, again, I don't know, I'm just saying this is how I believe it works. Then you would assign someone that project. And over the course of the next 6 months or 8 months or a year, while we are prepping for the next budget, they would be preparing a document to say, this is the cost. These are maybe the unforeseen circumstances, this is what. And so by the time we get to the budget or the CIP request, we have that information. I'm not sure why we would make the request, wait a year to do the research, and then come back to the next CIP or the next budget process and then say, all right, now I think we could get started on this. I'm just saying, could it be simplified, the process of requesting projects and across the board, not just in your department, and just saying that we make a recommendation as a council, the city manager sends that to a head of the department, and they just follow through, periodically, and then we get a report back. It goes to the kind of the conversation that we were having yesterday in rules of city government with accountability. Like, how does that work?
So, Alderman Gay, before I let Mr. Johnson speak, most of the CIP requests come from Public Works, and that's because they have roads and sidewalks and a whole bunch of other projects. They have a new Public Works facility to build.
They're doing a nice one in my ward too, on Martha Street.
Right. So it's very rare that these are generated by the council. They're reviewed by the council, but it is not usually the case that the council is precipitating a lot of CIP requests. It is generated internally from the city staff. But Mr. Johnson, you had your hand up and you wanted to respond.
Yes, thank you, Alderman. Alderman Gay, if I could just take a moment, I could explain what the process is that we are speaking on. It's more or less in line with the overarching, the broad strokes of what you're describing, which I think you're on the money as the right way to deliver a CIP without excessive dwell time in what we're calling the CIP. The process that we're proposing has about an 8-month period, slightly less than a year, for staff to develop a fully scoped project that is that has a decent schedule, has a decent budget, has a decent detailing of what the work is that is required to deliver this project. And I'm speaking jargonish, I'll just eliminate that to explain what deliver is. So when you deliver a project, it just means that you've built the project in accordance with what the stakeholders decided it should be built in, and you've sort of resolved any claims. So the project is finished. You're done. You sign off and it's finished. So it gives us about an 8-month period to do that. And there are 3 steps within that time frame that we would follow. The first is, as David mentioned, the project initiation phase. And that's where you say, through the city manager, the city manager is the one who directs the directors and me what to do, right? So the council tells the city manager directs, look, do a PIF for, we need a PIF for whatever it is, doing Main Street, making Main Street wider, just to make that up. We would then, now making Main Street wider is at that point just an idea. There are lots of problems that are associated with an old city, with widening the Main Street, that we do not know at the point at which we have that sort of bracketed placeholder of just a description of what your desire is. So during the project initiation phase, we would go through a systematic way of determining, what our order of magnitude of cost would be, our likely kinds of issues that we would face, who primary stakeholders might be, think a rough idea of how long this project would take. And it's very rough because we don't know, we haven't done any real detailed investigations as to what's involved. We don't know if there are utilities buried. We don't know if there's contamination under the road. We don't know if the in situ material is strong enough to meet the current standard of a road. We don't know any of that at the point at which we're doing the PIF. We would then go back to the city manager, finance director, and discuss that this is the PIF we've received, and we think it will cost about $4 million. Just made it up. Do you want us to proceed further with this? And he says, yes, this is important, proceed. There's a second phase. If the project is simple, or has a high priority, we bypass this intermediate phase and we go directly to scoping, to detailed scoping. And that's where we will do some non-destructive testing. We might do some test pits. We might go do a more exhaustive examination of who our stakeholders are and sort of flesh out what a better schedule is, what a better budget is, what sorts of risks we're likely to face, how we'll deal with HPC and the other commissions and boards, et cetera, of that nature. And then we will have a project that is sort of where the engineer who has been assigned this understands clearly what has to be done. If they've thought about it for more than an hour or so, they've gone a little deeper into the weeds. The estimate is reasonably okay. It's probably within 20% error at that phase because we don't have a contractor estimate. And we can then come back to the stakeholder, the council if it is, and say, listen, this project will take 2 years to do. It will cost $6 million. We have, these sorts of stakeholders are for it. These are who are against it. The whole gamut of what's involved in terms of delivering the project. And if it is felt that at that point that it is a project that is still worthy or that should be done, it is inserted into the CIP and the project manager can then just go through check off the boxes of what they have already thought through. And it does not dwell in the CIP for 5 or 6 years while they suddenly discovered that, we didn't account for contamination. This soil is no good. It's oyster shells or something like that, which no one knew ahead of time, which is sort of what is happening a bit now. Now, there's an intermediate phase. Suppose we have a project that is really complicated, and has other issues that we did not know. There's an intermediate phase where the project manager goes through some scoping and says, listen, this project is going to really cost, $10 million or something like that. It's really sort of a big deal to sort of get this to happen. We have, complex stakeholders like maybe the state or the county or some other stakeholders difficult to deal with, challenging to deal with. Do you want us to proceed with this project at this point? At each point, we are checking in with you, with the stakeholders as to really, once we've given you more information, is this still something that has the priority that you want, that you thought it was? Because you have an idea of what you think is a great project, but are you prepared to pay the cost? Are you prepared to deal with the politics associated with it or things of that nature?
Could I ask a question then in regards to this? Because I think this, we may be in the pre-phase of this, but so for example, when the Wells Cove or the water access, we really started hammering in on that last June, to be exact, because I remember it was around all the same time as all the protesting and stuff were going on. And so should we have, I thought it was clear, but should we have then made a formal or written request to the city manager to say, starting from June of 2020, we want to start looking at possible ways that, we can expand and improve water access in the city, and so that it could be included in this year's budget. Is that something that we should have done last year?
I can't really speak to that. I think the city has an existing process that has existed for a while and has worked well for a while, reasonably well for a while. So I guess you would follow whatever that process was for getting. I think they used to rank the projects according to some criteria, some metric that was used that gave it an index of ranking. And if that was the process, then it probably would be the thing to do, because the engineers need time to work out what is involved with putting a dock at Hawkins Cove or wherever it is, or whatever it is that is the project is desired, because there are always surprises, so to speak, or unknowns, let's call it that, associated once you start moving earth and doing things of that nature, particularly when older cities tended not to have very good record drawings of anything. So if you have existing infrastructure, sometimes those record drawings don't exist or have been lost or whatever it is. Either they weren't done or they were lost or whatever has happened. So there's a lot of work that the staff have to do to be able to get us to the point where we can build. Because the problem with the current process, the big problem with our current process is that in a sense, we are giving you a false assurance that this will be done in accordance with the priority that you're saying that it needs to be done with. Because your assumption is that once it's put in the CIP, that Public Works will get this done quickly because it's a priority for you. But what has happened is that an IDA has made it into that. The time needed to sort of determine what needs to be done and truly what it will cost is being done while it is dwelling in the CIP. So you already are adding almost that 8-month time that staff need to sort of figure that out before any work can be done, before you can do any kind of design or something like that, or you have to use a different delivery method that may be more expensive for the particular job that you're trying to get done. So I think that really, in my experience with using this kind of process and my own strong belief in this, is that the process that I'm suggesting that we follow, recommending that we follow, will actually shorten the dwell time, will actually have more throughput through the CIP. That's one big plus. Secondly, it will right-size the CIP, because you could fill the CIP with tons of ideas that are far too much work for the manpower we have. If we have X number of people, right, we only have 20, the hours they work a year times that number. So it's like an accounting problem. So you have a capacity, staff capacity, and the work has a demand. So if the CIP is not balanced, right, you will find that they will not be able to move all the projects through. And secondly, the schedules that we provide you, the budgets that we provide you, are sort of not really as accurate as they could be. They have far too much variation, potential for variation. And I think that is frustrating. I mean, I'm new to Annapolis, but I've worked with councils before, and I know that this frustrates the councils when we do stuff like that.
I would answer Dewan's question a different way, because it seems to me what you're talking about, Director Johnson, is more the back end and more the technical end of things. And I think that the answer to your question is, should we, meaning we, the council, have done something last June? I think the first step is to define we. If we is just you and me, that's not a consensus of the council. And that's why I think what Alderwoman Finlayson was suggesting, and I've interjected this notion too, is there needs to be some sort of a pre-CIP function, particularly for things that are being generated from the council. Road repairs, that cycle, sidewalk, new facilities, those I think largely come from within the administration, and it's things that we know we need to do, a new furnace in City Hall or HVAC or whatever. But I think the first step back in June was we needed to define whether there was a we that constitutes 5 or more council members. We had to get some facts together ourselves. And I think that from this discussion, my sense is, and I'm going to test this with you, David, that maybe we do need to have a resolution that from the city council that the city commence with plans to put in a dock at Wells Cove. And that could go in the CIP, or that could be some special emergency project if it gets 5 votes. But there's probably not a lot of sense in wasting time on this if it's only Alderman Gay and I that want this. I don't think that's the case. And I think the council has across the board expressed a desire for maintaining and enhancing the existing public access and seeking and making possible additional public water access. But that itself is a testable hypothesis that we really haven't dealt with legislatively. So it almost feels like there's 2 kinds of things here. Capital projects that are as a matter of routine for running and maintaining the city's infrastructure, and capital projects that are things that are bubbling up through the city council as things that are desirable to serve our constituents. And I think that's a small size amount of capital investment compared to maintaining our streets or our buildings and those sorts of things. But David, I would put it to you, because the reason I put this on the agenda, and I won't even get into my second thing given the time, which is buying back the city dock from wildlife and fishery. But how do we proceed with Wells Cove at this point? I would like to enact the kinds of things that were agreed to at the meetings you and I and Dr. Nash and others have had with the mayor. I think the mayor is in sync with doing something at Wells Cove. Maybe it isn't a CIP project. Maybe this is just a special capital project.
Yeah, I hate to get, in this meeting, I hate to get stuck on Wells Cove because I don't think right now it is a CIP meeting. It's a real estate transaction issue right now. And you know, we have continued to move forward with so right now there is no city easement there. That's all private property. Okay, so the misguided beliefs that we have water access right now is just that. It's not accurate. But there's a plat that says that we can, upon request, get that easement, and that was never done over the last 30 years. So now it's being worked on. In order for us to ask for it, we have to understand what the boundaries of that easement are. And so we've had a survey done. And so the survey has taken 6 months or 8 months. It's taken way too long, but that survey is now done. The law office is preparing that letter, and we're going to send that letter saying, please make this easement official as stated on the plat. So we'll see what happens with that. The other thing that we're doing, what that's going to give us is the ability for people to walk across that easement to get to the edge of the water, but not get water access. So they can view the water, but and water access as far as viewing, but not water access as far as launching a watercraft into the water. So we're having appraisals done, both to go to the right and to go to the left, to acquire easements to allow people to actually access the water. Again, this is going to take a little bit of time because the appraisers need to do their due diligence to give us a price. We will then make an offer to one of those property owners in accordance with the appraisal of a fair market value for acquiring an easement so people have water access. All of that's moving forward. All that's being done. So we don't need a CIP for any of that. And clearly that, you know, the mayor's on board with this and is very supportive. And since June, we've been working on this, but it's a slow trot, right? It's a slow walk. Unfortunately, If we find that those options to go either to the right or to the left are not good options, and in fact, if it's an option to go straight over the existing outfall, storm drain outfall that's there, and again, Public Works has taken a look at that. Director Johnson has that on his to-do list to do a feasibility look to see if that's even possible. Then maybe it'll become a CIP. And at that point, we would not wait a whole cycle to add it next year to the CIP. We would move forward and ask the council to approve a project.
Got to get there a little early.
Out of cycle.
I love you for it. Carefully.
Okay.
So we would add it to the CIP at that point if we can in fact build some sort of a floating dock or some kind of dock over top of the outfall.
So how does the council weigh in on that, David? Because it seems to me like you've laid out three options. The one that I think is most appealing, both from legal and other approaches, is the middle option. Forget about trying to get easements from either of the adjoining property owners. I don't quite understand that we absolutely have a right of way. Even before Heron Cove was built, there was a right of way for the sewer. And it seems to me that we have legislated public access. And so I'm not understanding why the number one initiative isn't to proceed to build a dock over top of our right of way out to the water. And I guess I'd like a process where the council at large can be brought into that dialogue. As you know, one of my frustrations is trying to get information on what the city's doing. I have no doubt but what the city is doing all kinds of things, but some of these things, it seems to me, are things that we have a right to weigh in on and say, we would like to pursue this as the number one option, not that or not that. And we don't seem to have a process like that.
Right now, we need to understand if that's even feasible. If that's feasible, then we definitely would come back to the council and say, we need an emergency CIP because we think it's feasible to build over top of that outfall. But absent that, I think it's wasting your time, wasting our time to come forward with something that may not prove to be feasible. And we agree that is the easiest route to go, because if we have to do eminent domain, that's going to take a lot of time.
Forever.
I mean, it's going to make this process that we've been through so far seem like it's at lightning speed.
And I think the other property owner has absolutely no incentive to grant us a right of way and has in public testimony indicated they have no desire to do that. They've gotten their permit from the port warden. They're free and clear. They're gone. And we've already heard from the lawyers for Blue Heron that they're not going to be amenable to any right of way there. So it is eminent domain, but it does seem to me that we do have a straightforward course to go out from our public access, our public right of way, and create this public access to the water. So, but it feels like all of this is going on without deliberation. I mean, that I have been privileged, the rest of the council hasn't, to be in some of these internal meetings. Alderman Gay has been at some of those, but not all of them. But this is an issue that is affecting us. It's affecting us immediately. It is affecting us urgently. And it really is a broad policy issue about public access to the water. It's not going to go away. And it's not just Wells Cove. It is Hawkins Cove, and it is other discussions with the city attorney about gated communities writ large and whether we should allow those. And Alderman Gay, you remember our discussion with City Attorney Lyles about that. But this getting access to the water in a waterside community where almost none of us have access to the water, and certainly only those who are privileged to buy a slip, is really a policy issue. And I just don't feel, I mean, I can ask for a resolution to be drafted that would get, if it gets a majority vote of the council, says let's build out into the water from the city's right of way, if that's what's needed. But, you know, I also want to listen to your counsel. You're saying don't draft that if it's not physically or engineeringly feasible. But again, we have constituents we have to answer to, and we have policies that we have made, and maybe we need to make them even more formally. But you know, I'm hearing processes of pursuing a whole bunch of things that frankly are not only not realistic. I don't even desire doing eminent domain, and I certainly don't desire seeking an easement from either Mr. Parham or from Blue Heron. So how do we get everybody in sync on this?
Well, I think I mean, we published the chronology because we got so many comments. So we published the chronology. We stated over and over the steps that were taken, and the steps are being done in parallel. We're going to issue the letter to get the right of way, as you call it, or the easement to get people back there. Now that we have the survey completed, Director Johnson is looking at the feasibility to build over top of the outfall, and we're getting appraisals done for the easements on the other side. And we agree. We don't think that those property owners are going to easily give up their property. So I think it's going to be a contentious process that involves eminent domain. And as I said, that takes a long time. So all of these things are being worked. So I'm not sure how, I mean, even if you did that resolution, I'm not sure how that would change one thing that we're doing or would be able to speed it up, because we're working as quickly as we can on all of those fronts.
Well, let me say, Alderwoman Finlayson, go ahead, but I apologize for taking up so much of the time for the Finance Committee, but I do think this is a worthwhile dialogue. I'm just not sure Finance Committee is the right place to do it, and we do have another order of business.
Well, first of all, we have professional staff. And I think before we think about sponsoring any type of legislation, we look to the direction of our professional staff. So if professional staff, and I'm talking about our city manager, our public works director, and all of the other directors, make a recommendation that we do pursue it, then that's what we do. But right now, I believe it's premature. I don't want it to be any more political than it has already become. This is a professional issue as far as I'm concerned. Is it viable to do this? And we have to look to our directors and our engineers to tell us whether it's doable or not. And then we go from there. You know, maybe we should be making it clear to other department heads and their staffs what our policies are. You know, there shouldn't be any approval of projects coming down the pike that will block access to water, period. And if those projects are being approved, then we do need to weigh in. But we need to rely on Director Gerald to make sure that staff isn't approving projects that go against what we have determined as our policy. Now, what I really wanted to say to begin with was to direct Alderman Gay to, my other computer's died because it's been so long. We received a notice of the Board of Appeals approval of 39 Hudson Street, which is our new public works facility, okay? There is an attachment, and he just sent it yesterday, as I see. It goes through all of the different aspects that must be approved in order to move that project forward. Now, that's a different project, has nothing to do with what we're talking about now, but it's a great example of all of the steps that Public Works has to go through in order to get a project approved. Okay, so if you really want to see, and I was shocked, and I'm sure we all were, because We're not engineers. We're not, professional staff in this capacity. But I felt that this email really gives you good insight. Alderman Gay, are you following me? It's the Board of Appeals approval of Hudson Street. Just peruse it and you'll see all the steps that are involved that may help explain why it takes so long, because there's so many moving pieces. And Director Johnson did make this presentation to the Board of Appeals and they approved, of course, our project. But anyway, it's a good example, gives you an opportunity to see all the steps. So thank you.
So Alderman McKinley, I want to respond to the first part of your comments because I disagree with you that this is a professional issue. I think there is a policy issue here, and that is the policy of public water access. And only 9 people in the city make policy, the electeds.
I didn't say anything contrary to that. So
the resolution would have to do with stating a policy, a general policy about water access, and could conceivably be specific to policies on water access at Wells Cove and Hawkins Cove. And then of course it goes to the professional staff. But I think that the policy aspects of this have been going on in the mayor's office and in the back room, not with the council. And I think that it is time to have a city council policy statement on water access that will cover all water access. I don't think Wells Cove or Hawkins Cove are any different than any other street in or other paper street in where water access issues pertain. And in fact, at the Port Wardens, right before the discussion of this particular thing, there was a paper street that went into the Severn River, and they got into the lateral lines and they preserved a 20-foot right-of-way for city water access. And so this water access is the policy issue. You're absolutely right. The professional issue, the technical issues are the province of the staff. But water access policy, I think, is 100% our province, and that we need to speak to it, but not in the finance committee.
You misunderstood what I was saying. I wasn't suggesting that we not weigh in on policy. Absolutely. And that was, in essence, what I was saying. That the policy piece, we set the policy, staff implements the policy. And we have to make sure that staff does understand what our policies are so they can implement them. I would just hate for us to have a policy on very specific things as opposed to general access to water that would be inclusive of every corner of our city. So I just want to be clear. Thank you.
All right. So thank you for that. I appreciate your thoughts. And we have 6 minutes left to talk about the Finance Committee schedule once we receive the fiscal 22 budget. And Mr. Johnson, I really want to thank you for some provocative ideas, and I subscribe to what you're saying. I'm glad you're thinking about it, and I do think that we need to have a better CIP process and a better way to have ideas about what the capital plan is. And it is clearly then the province of the staff to interleave what can be done and when. That old expression, I can do anything, I just can't do everything. You have to figure out how you and your staff or the other city staff can get these capital projects done and the budget and all of the engineering consequences. So I'm very happy to have heard your thoughts on that, and I would like to help in whatever way we can. But right now we have the more immediate thing. We get the mayor's budget on Monday. We had talked about a schedule that would include first a work session on Thursday where the city manager and the city finance director and others will lay out the mayor's budget. I think we'll probably have some really helpful PowerPoint slides from the city manager. I shared with you and Alderman Payone a 2-page document that David had worked up in tables that Director Dickinson had shared with us about the projected revenues, expenditures, and fund balances. I think that gives us a pretty clear idea of where the budget's going. I think that we will be also talking about how ARPA and CARES money affects the fiscal 22 budget and possibly the fiscal 23 budget. But the general sense that I thought we were proceeding with is that we would like to follow the same process last year, which is to have the departments present following their performance measurement outline, presenting to us what they do. And we wanted to have as much of that presented in the evening for those council members who work. I don't know that we can do all of our work there, but we have a relative short period of time for us to work up our evaluation and recommendation to the city council. That's due the first council meeting in May. So we get the first council meeting in April, we get the budget. I would really like everybody on the council to come to our meetings, and then we have to have our report to the council the first meeting in May. So I guess the proposal was that we follow a schedule similar in terms of numbers of meetings, similar to last year, which was sort of like we met every day except Friday. That takes up a lot of time for the finance director and the city manager. But I'm certainly open to discussion, but I think we need to start marking dates on our calendars for the finances charged for deliberating on the mayor's budget once received.
Mr. Chair, may I ask, are you suggesting that our first meeting after the mayor's presentation would be on the 15th at the work session?
That was my notion, because that's when everybody on the council will be invited to go away, phone call. We'll be invited to listen to the overview of the budget. And I hope everyone will attend that. And I thought that the PowerPoints that we received, first of all, we'll be seeing the budget in a new format because it's going to be in the OpenGov format. But I thought that the overview we got last time was extremely helpful. I hope that each of the departments is looking at the presentations from last year, refine them. In many cases, they were very good. In other cases, they needed some help. And that's traditionally what we've done. We've listened to each of the departments come in and give us an overview of their operations, their budget. And we usually invite them, much to the displeasure of the city manager, to talk to us about enhancements that weren't recognized. I don't know that we have the latitude for enhancements once again, but we certainly want to hear about what we're not getting, unless we raise taxes, we're not getting in the budget. I've seen a blank look on your face. I don't know whether
was there a question there or what?
No, I thought you were asking the question. I thought I was responding to it.
You answered my question about an hour ago.
Okay. So yes, we'll have the work session, and then we, the committee, start our work. And as in answer to your question, I was attempting to say, the way we've done it in the past is we've heard from each of the departments following the performance management. And so we need to schedule dates to hear them, and they need to schedule when they can come and present to us.
So may we ask Ms. Green to begin? The 15th is the work session.
Right.
And then our meetings will start in earnest starting on the 19th, and that'll be 4 days a week, Monday through Thursday, for each week following until the first week of May, I guess it is. When is our report due?
It's due May 8th, I believe. Is that let me get my calendar.
Okay. So that gives us 2 weeks,
May
8
10th.
May 10th.
sessions.
May 10th.
Okay, so that gives us 12 sessions to hear and make some deliberations on everything.
Correct. And then the question is, last year and I think both for you and Fred, we needed to work around physical therapy schedules and things like that. So time of day for the meetings, I think we had started meeting around 10 in the morning. And sometimes we had afternoon sessions. A lot of that will be determined by the availability of the departments to come and present to us, and also the city manager and the finance director's schedules, because they do other things.
No, I am using this as an excuse to not do physical therapy. So don't tell my doctor, but if I can avoid physical therapy, I'm just kidding. But I would like for us to.
I won't quote you on that, Sheila.
Thank you, since we have the same physical therapist. I know you're back. I would like for us to keep in mind staff time, as you just mentioned, especially if we talk about doing evening sessions. Some staff are more available in the evening than other staff. I
think the evening sessions was more of a concession to Rob and Dewan, in particular, Brooks, who also works. We have council members at work. As we had a little bit of today, and it's not a criticism, it's just experience. Sometimes we go through all the work, we hear everything, and then we redo it all when we get to the general council sessions. Just like we had a tutorial on how the CIP works this morning. So I thought evening sessions, and we'd have to pick our spots. I would think evening sessions for big departments, police, fire, and public works might be in order, because that's the biggest chunk of the budget. And it also is where a lot of the questions are centered. So those were ones that I sort of had in my mind's eye could be evening sessions. But I think that it would be good to have Ms. Green poll the council members other than the finance committee and ask them, first of all, do you want these meetings? What do you think? Who would you like to hear from if we made it available in the evening? And there may be no takers, in which case we go back to our during the day schedule.
I think that's a great idea to ask them if they are going to participate. I think you could open a can of worms if you ask them who they want to hear, because then you're trying to schedule 9 people's opinions on all of our directors. But I have one other recommendation. If you recall 2 years ago when Chief Stokes was our acting city manager, he brought us snacks every day. And so I'm suggesting that Alderman Payon take over that responsibility for our meetings whenever we get together again.
You raised a different question, I don't think by intention, but are we meeting virtually, or are we going to meet in the council chambers?
I put my hand up to ask that very question, because starting in May, we're going to be able to meet in person if you would like to. I think we'll still have the capability of doing it virtual. But if you'd like to meet in person, we can do that starting in May, which that'll just be the last week of the meetings, I suppose, but it's still an opportunity.
I think meeting at council chambers it would be, my presumption would be more convenient both for you and Jody, but also for the departments, because they can just come over to chambers and they can be in and out as they so choose. But I'll leave that to input from my colleagues on the committee.
Well, they don't move anywhere if we do it virtually.
Pardon me?
They don't have to move at all if we do it virtually.
I think that's the most convenient for them to do it virtually.
Okay.
And we're talking about the last week when we're going to be doing our deliberations, not when we should have heard from all the department heads by that time.
Yeah, do we want to set out any, so it sounds like we're going to do it in answer to City Manager Gerald. It sounds like the preference is to continue to do it virtually. I'm indifferent. Do we want to set any parameters in terms of our expectation on the format and length of the presentations by departments? City Manager Gerald.
Yeah, so what I've asked all the department heads to do is to use the format that Marcia Patrick used last year, since that seemed to go over very well. Instead of trying to reinvent the wheel, just use that. And I ask them not to be creative, not to try to better it, just try to do like Marcia did. Because if we have a standard format, everybody gets used to talking in that same order of things. I think it flows better. So that's what I've asked them to do.
Committee, what's your sense? That sounds good to me.
I like it.
Yeah. City Manager Gerald, some departments spent most of their time lobbying for money that they didn't get. I don't know how you stop them from doing that, but what is your direction to the department heads? We definitely need to hear what they're getting and what they're doing with that, but do we need any rules of the road, or is that something you're going to do internally?
Something I'll do. I mean, they know that they weren't able to add those things to the budget, and that this is a tough budget year. So I think they understand that, but we'll definitely reiterate that.
Okay.
May I ask Mr. Gerald a very specific question about enhancements? I spoke to the mayor briefly yesterday about a $40,000 enhancement that deals with 4 components of our opioid battle. And I'm hoping that will be in his budget, but if it's not, I think that's an enhancement we'd like to hear about.
That's the first I've heard about that.
Who coordinates it? Director Simmons, I guess. And I can never remember the programs. I know one is the Naptown program. One is another opioid program. We get funding from the state and from the county also, but I think we have to come up with a certain amount also. So if you'll check with Director Simmons, he'll know what I'm trying to talk about.
Well, I can tell you that it's too late to add it to the budget right now. So the budget's going to be submitted without that. So that would be subject to an amendment at that point. If you want to add it, it would be an amendment to the budget, because we can't add it this late.
Okay, the mayor said he thought it was in it, but he wasn't sure, so you're sure.
It depends if it's an existing grant program. It may be one of the grants that we've listed. But if it's something new that they're adding to the program, this is the first I've heard of it.
It would be our contribution. I don't think it's exactly matching, but how we have to do our share too.
So sometimes their matching can be done by us paying their salaries through the general fund, and they use those salary costs as matches against these grants. So that may be what they're doing. And if it's an ongoing thing and they've been doing it previously, that may be what they're doing, but I'll check with them.
Okay, please.
But
Thank you.
Alderwoman Finlayson, you do raise a different issue, and that is, I'm assuming we will get a presentation from the Office of the Mayor, particularly since they have so many ongoing programs.
That's my understanding. They don't work for me. Please understand that, but that's my understanding.
Neither does the Office of Law, but we get a presentation from them. I think that there are so many programs, and actually some very interesting ones, the VIP program and so forth, that we're just getting started the last time. And it is expenditures of city monies. It is under our purview per the charter. So I guess, I don't know, do you want me to send an email to the mayor saying it is our expectation that the mayor's office will be giving the finance committee a presentation?
Yeah, I think that would be helpful. And I'll talk to Susie as well.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair, may I raise one other thing now that you raised the issue at the mayor's office? We are funding an African-American liaison, which you know I initiated some administrations ago. And now I understand those responsibilities have been passed on to Laura Gutierrez. So if she's doing Hispanic and African-American, I just want an explanation of how this is being taken care of.
Yeah, I can explain that, Alderwoman Finlayson. So the only thing that was passed on was the We Care team responsibilities. So there was an African-American group and there was a Hispanic group for We Care. And Tola managed the African-American group and Laura managed the Hispanic group. Because of all of his other responsibilities, Tola, the lead program and a lot of other things, the management of that We Care team in its entirety was turned over to Laura. But that was the only thing that moved to her. He's still the African-American liaison. He still has all those responsibilities. It was just his management of the African-American part of the We Care team that was passed over.
Thank you for that. What brought it to my attention was a few meetings ago when the mayor gave statistics about what was going on in the Hispanic community and no statistics about the African-American community. So I inquired of staff, and that's when I was told that was all in Laura's hands. But Mr. Chair, I would like for us to hear a report on the successes of these programs. The mayor had mentioned something to me also. So that would be part of Susie and her staff's presentation, I assume.
Right, so I'll include that in my email to the mayor from the committee. One other thing that was a spicy topic last year that I think we need to address early on in the process is the constant yield. I think we need to do a little bit more than just lay out what the constant yield is, and I'd be happy to partake in that. Constant yield was a political device that was brought on by then State Senator Cardin after the state took over the property assessments process. I think that if we had done constant yield the day that Sheila and I came on the council, our property tax revenue, as we had to lower and lower the tax rate, would probably be about $35–40 million. Clearly not enough to run the city, doesn't even recognize increase in the cost of doing business. So I think we will need to talk about constant yield, but I think we need to do a better job of putting in a proper context. It would be ludicrous to think about running the city on a constant yield budget from property taxes, no matter when we started doing that, because we would fall way short of the monies necessary to run the city. Probably couldn't even support police and fire's budget alone in a constant yield level from Ellen Moyer's days as mayor. But it is going to come up, so I'm just raising it. Are there any other matters? We're running long, Jody. Are there any quick things that you need to give us as an update other than your trips to Alabama?
Yeah. I'll skip that part. But you have the CAFR that's been issued, and we passed that along to you. And you've seen just a preliminary overview of some of the main points of the budget. But other than that, we're getting the budget books finalized for you. And to look as best we can, the OpenGov product has some limitations on formatting. So we're kind of stuck with their product for now. And I'm sure they'll have a lot of improvements in the years to come. but we're very busy, and Katie and I will be finishing that up in the next few days.
For troglodytes such as myself, will there be a hard copy of the CAFR?
So so we will be printing hard copies of the CAFR. I'm just not sure how quickly that can get done. I have to have my office manager come in and get a contract together with a printer to do that. And so it's going to be a few weeks. If you want a copy in the meantime, we'd have to prepare that for you. And if anybody after Monday, if you would like a hard copy of the budget that you don't want to prepare yourself, you'll have to let us know too, so we can get that to you. Because right now we're planning on doing it all electronically, a PDF version electronically, and then an interactive version electronically for the council to look at.
So there won't be a physical budget binder.
We can give you that, but we're going to need to know what you want in it. You had talked about making your own hard copy, which can be done. And but if you want us to pull together something for you, please let me know.
So those of us that look at tables in different sections and we stick our fingers in the pages, the hard copy is almost essential. I don't know of any other way to flip back and forth to compare, say, police to fire or something like that.
Okay, so you'll let us know what you want in a budget binder, and we will pull something together for you. And I would pass that along to other council members who want something physical.
So in that, before I recognize you, Alderwoman Finlayson, that also raises the issue of the line item. I think you had indicated that can't be done in OpenGov. So last year, the way you did it was to give us the line items with the places that it attaches in the budget, the physical budget binder. Is that how we're going to do it again, or is there going to be a virtual?
You can see it in OpenGov. If you get into the interactive version of the online version and you click on it, it'll show you everything that's in that line item. But you have to, if you want a physical document of that, you're going to have to print it.
Okay.
Print screen or something. And so you'd have to click on those lines one at a time and print screen everything. Last year we had a schedule that had all the detail in it that we prepared ourselves. I feel like we would be duplicating effort there, but if that's something you feel you absolutely need, we'll try to find some time to do it for you.
So why don't we hold the line? I can use some of my expense money to print out all of this stuff, I guess, but because I think each person is different on what they're comfortable
yes.
with.
And so, like I say, if there's something somebody absolutely needs to use as a physical version, let us know and we'll take some time, but we don't want to have to do that before Monday. So that would be something we can give you right after we deliver.
You mean you're busy?
Yeah.
Alderwoman Finlayson.
First of all, I would like a binder, and unfortunately, I'm still in Wisconsin. I don't have a previous binder to share with you because our previous binders were pretty inclusive, and as the chairman said, you could look at one department over another and staffing and all that. So I don't know how to tell you what I want in it from where I am. But I trust he will tell you.
I do. I want the same binder we got last year after it got fully filled in with things like the line item and some other supplementary information. But
okay. Two other questions. I received a call yesterday about, I guess you distributed the CAFR to the Finance Advisory Commission.
Yes, they have a meeting tomorrow morning, and I told them I could give them a little bit of highlight information on the year.
Okay, because the question to me was that a completed and up-to-date CAFR? And
yes, if there's an audit opinion in there signed by the auditing firm, it's a final report, and that's what we distributed.
Okay, and secondly, are we giving lessons on open meeting laws or act? Because I received a call from someone else on the commission who was supposed to participate in an open meetings webinar. So how does one access in case we get other calls?
I think Hillary might be coordinating those lessons. I think she sent around an email to all the commission members about when those are going to be held and how to sign up for one of those. I didn't read it in detail because it wasn't intended for me, but she did send it around recently.
Okay, thank you. And I'll look for an email from her, or at least reference to someone. And lastly, are we going to get in advance the mayor's, his state of the city address? Does anyone know?
I don't know, but I would think that that's a question for them. And I wouldn't be surprised if they wanted it the first delivery of that would be on the night of the budget presentation, but that may not be what they intend. They may be willing.
Well, I'm not suggesting that we get it well in advance, but, just before and I guess I'm going back to traditionally, we were given a copy of it just before the presentation, so that we could follow and make notations as it's being delivered. So that's a question.
So are you looking for the script, or I guess that's the script for that, the text?
The text.
Yeah, no, it's not the script, but we usually last year, I think we got it several days after, which was his state of the city address.
Right, the text.
The text.
Yeah. So, thank you.
Okay, is it time for Alderman Payon to make his usual contribution?
Absolutely. But before I do, Mr. Chairman, for scheduling purposes, if it makes any difference, I did send you a note about 2 weeks ago that I'd be gone on the 23rd and the 22nd and 23rd of April. I'd be out of town and unavailable for meetings on those dates.
Did you copy Miss Green?
Did I copy who?
Miss Green.
I don't know if I did or not.
Okay. Well, if you would do that, because clearly we've dropped the assignment of scheduling us on her. And if we can accommodate that, I would want to do that, but
Okay.
We'll have to see how the schedule works.
Actually, if it's a virtual meeting, I may very well be able to pick up on it where I am, but we'll see.
I think we concluded that we will be doing it virtually.
Okay, I'm not sure I'll be able to participate, but I think it will mean a lot if I just observe.
I hope Julian is listening to this. His life just got more miserable. Alderwoman Finlayson.
The 22nd is a Thursday, 23rd is
Correct.
So we're only talking about missing one day. And maybe we need to talk about extending another meeting to accommodate for Alderman Payon's presence. Or having two in a day, maybe one morning, one evening or something. I don't know. But
that's how we ended up in the last year, was going to afternoon sessions as well. But that was primarily when we were in our deliberations. So, all right. Sorry we ran over, but is there a motion to adjourn?
There is. I move that we adjourn.
I'll second that emotion.
All right. All in favor, say. Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jody and David.
Thank you.
All those in favor of adjourning signify by saying aye. Aye. The ayes have it. Thank you.